revans@sau21.org. Adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event that the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. We will now take roll call.
Anthony Lang.
Present, family in and out.
Barbara Goodman.
Present, I am alone.
Greg Parrish.
Present, family in and out.
Jason Farias.
Present, family in and out.
Jill Swayze.
Present, family in and out.
Brian Belanger.
Present, family in and out.
Danielle Strader.
Present.
Are you alone?
Sorry, yes, alone. Thank
Martin
you.
Tavishian.
Present and alone.
Nermina Peterson.
Present with family in and out.
Tom Von Jess.
Present alone.
Christina Kaiser.
Present, family in and out.
Forrest Carter is absent. Jennifer Hubbard.
Present with family.
Jessica Brown is absent. Kelly Huber.
Family in and out.
Jim Keim.
Present and alone.
Rebecca Burdick.
Present, family in and out.
Sharon Gordon.
Present, family in and out.
Henry Marsh.
Present, alone.
Leslie LaFond.
Present and alone.
Nicole Seco.
Present and alone.
Tony Delano.
Present with family in and out.
And Tricia O'Keefe.
Present and alone.
All right, I have the roll call taken.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you all for coming tonight. The idea is tonight that Jim's going to give a slight intro of the process that we've gone through and with the search committee. And then we will be interviewing the two finalists. We've given them 30 minutes each. As we gave you all, there's sample questions that we can ask. I think if it's okay, what I'll do is I'll welcome each one of them, or Jim can, either one of us, and just start with one of the questions. And if somebody wants to, jump in on the rest of them, that would be fine. And then after we've heard both of them, we'll go into non-public to discuss them. I hope everybody's had a chance to review all the notes that we've had, from their visits, their background checks, resumes, whatnot. So anybody have any questions on the process of tonight?
Leslie, this is Greg. When you're done, can I have the floor for a few minutes?
Sure.
Let me know when. Pardon? Can I go?
Go ahead. What do you need?
I'd like to go on record that I oppose this meeting taking place via Zoom. I expressed that to you in an email earlier this week, Leslie. I appreciate you reaching out to the boards, but we're making a monumental decision tonight. We're selecting the next superintendent of our school district. This person will oversee budgets in the excess of $60 million. They will define an education plan and implement it to educate our 2,400 students. And this individual will have the opportunity to lead our district for 10 years. And I think the business decision to hold this meeting via Zoom is a very poor one on our part. It's my understanding that
You cut out.
Greg, you frozen?
and after a 15, 20, 30-minute Zoom meeting.
Greg, you were frozen.
Greg, you were frozen.
Shit.
No, not me this time.
Well, I'm not sure how much you heard, but I think it's a bad business decision. Nobody on the boards have met these finalists, and this meeting should have been held in person. And I want to go on record saying that. I don't think we're conducting ourselves as board members and responsible to our communities with this magnitude of decision being made via Zoom. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, Jim?
Sure. Just want to take everybody through the process here. The public's aware of what's been happening over the last, it's actually a little over 3 months. So our first meeting, we formed a search committee, which consisted of 16 members. It was comprised of board members, teachers, administrators, and parents. And then later we added, once there was a new joint board chair, Leslie came on, and which brought us up to 17. Our first our search committee meeting was January 27th. And really at the front end of the process, what we did was talk among the different constituencies that were appointed to the search committee to determine what the characteristics and qualities were for a desirable candidate for a permanent superintendent at SAU 21. We kind of went through, had a number of discussions. After that, we conducted both surveys and community and forums with various constituencies within SAU 21. Those included students, staff and faculty, and also the community. And then took all of the feedback from both the search committee members and the surveys and community and forums to determine kind of a desirable and I guess what qualities and competencies we were looking for in a superintendent moving forward. It was a very comprehensive process, and then once we determined kind of how we were going to look at things as a group, we then the advertisement was made for the position. There were 8 candidates who submitted a completed resume profile, of which 4 were selected to do the first round interviews. Those were conducted in they took about an hour and a half each, and then after that 3 were determined to go on to the second round, and those typically took around 3 to 4 hours for each person from an interview process. And then after that, it was determined that there were 2 finalists, which we're going to hear from tonight. From a process perspective, it was incredibly comprehensive, I would say. I think I've hired CEOs with a lot less diligence than what we conducted in this situation. And I guess from my perspective, it was, I'm really happy with how, and really thankful for all of the members that that comprised of the search committee, but also the the various constituents that participated in those surveys and those forums, because this is a very important hiring decision for our SAU. But I think we have 2 excellent candidates to choose from, and I'm looking forward to you all hearing from them tonight.
Great, thanks, Jim. All right, at this point, I think we have our first candidate. We've asked them to come at 6:15. Jim, do you want to start with the questions, or do you want me to? It's up to you.
I think you can go with it, Leslie.
Okay.
You ready for me to bring her in?
Yes. What do we have first?
We have Erin McMahon coming in first.
Yeah. Great.
And she should be coming in any minute.
All righty.
I think she's here. We just have so many people on the screen. You may have to toggle your screens.
Okay. Hi, Erin.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to see you.
How are you this evening? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And now I know you like to see everybody. Now you get to see all of them. So this is our joint board.
This is what I've been asking for the whole time.
There you go. I can't see you though, so I don't know where I don't know how I'm gonna do that. I don't know. I can't
Leslie,
find you, but I'll find
I
you.
pinned her. That was the easiest way for me. If you hit the dots, you can pin the candidate.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yeah.
Pin the dots. Pin the dots. All right, pin the dots. Nope, still can't find her.
The
There
dot,
she is. Hi, Erin. Okay. All right, so Erin, so what we're gonna do is at this point, we're gonna ask you a few questions, expound on them as you wish. And then the members will come in and ask questions as they see fit also for any follow-ups or whatnot. And then at the end, we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions of us, okay?
Great.
All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask a couple of leadership questions. So my first is, what is your experience working with multiple boards?
I think the first of all, I think it's an important question because the balance across the boards is a really important one. Being able to be present and hear all the needs of every member of the SAU 21 community. So I understand the need. When I would say the best approximation for my work across multiple boards is the fact that Denver had a larger board than many, smaller towns. And so I believe we had 12 members, and that represented 5 regions of the city. And we had 90,000 students. And so you had region, just like school committee elections, we had elections. So I worked, each board member would, for lack of a better word, they would represent a region of the city. And then we had 2 at large. And so through that, I learned both their constituencies and the region of the city with which they represented, as well as the global needs across the board. So that I would say my best experience, for my best comparable, is the work across the Denver board, which is inclusive of a city of 90,000.
Okay. Great.
Or the student population of 90,000. Denver
90,000. Yeah, that's just a small little group. Yeah. Can you tell us what you think your entry plan or your first 100 days would look like if you were given the opportunity?
So I would say that there's 2 parts to this question. The first is that there is more listening and learning for me to do. I had an incredible experience, thanks to Dr. Hobbs, on Monday, walking through and being part of each one of the school communities, but there is more work and more, there's essentially more engagement that I have to do in order to better understand and better lead. And so as part of that, my process would be working with each one of the boards to understand what has been the strategic direction of each community, and then working with the joint board to understand that, as well as continuing the work that you have done to survey parents, really get to know teachers, and really understand the dynamics of both the leadership team and the SAU 21. So there's the process I would follow essentially is, what would we want to start? What would we stop? And what would we want to see continue? And so, for example, when I was with the Winnicott team, one thing that they talked about that was really important was continuing the work around social emotional learning. And so in my experience, I'm an experienced leader who has a track record of uniting constituents around student achievement and social emotional health. And so I would really be looking across those 2 dimensions. Where are we academically? What do we need to stop, start, and continue? And then in terms of social and emotional health and well-being for both students and staff, what do we need to stop, start, and continue? And I would essentially, within those first 90 days, then build my first 90-day plan that would bring us to December 31st. And then we would have a second semester planning again for 22-23. So I see it in stages. And the most important thing to do is to start with listening, have a process by which you gain stakeholder feedback, while also continuing the momentum that's already really going in a great direction across SAU 21.
Great. And how would you communicate to all of the shareholders? How do you communicate best with all the shareholders that we have?
Yes, so I think there's essentially a few dimensions of communication. So I'm just going to start with the first. So the first one is to inform. So regular communication that I've used in the past and that I see the schools are using are whether it's a weekly newsletter or a monthly newsletter, if it's just information that we need to share globally. And then if there's district or there's school specific information, that's also email and that's communication. And then the next step in communication is the inquiry. So that's the two-way dialogue. And so that might be, if we decide to continue or are part of Zoom meetings, that might be part of the local, when teachers meet at each school, when families and parents get together, being part of that so that I'm part of the two-way dialogue. And then the third aspect is really the inspiration that I think is incredibly important as a leader, which is, this is hard, yes, and we can do this. One of the schools, I took a picture in this week when we were there. I think this was at Lincoln Ackerman, but it was this notion of, everything's going to be okay. And I think it's a really important moment for schools across the country and across the world that says, yes, it's been a difficult year and we've learned a great deal and it's time to move forward. Let's not talk about loss. Let's talk about acceleration. Let's talk about ways that we're taking what we learned from this year and accelerating into next year. And so that last piece of inspiration comes through, whether it's being in person at schools like Dr. Hobbs and I were this week, whether it's being together with each one of the boards, whether it's part of the joint board meeting, whether it's part of events. I was talking to the principal at Beth at Lincoln Ackerman about the what is it called when the maple syrup comes out of the sugar shack, the candy shack. I'm going to kill.
No, I think it's the Sugar Shack. Help me out, Hampton Falls.
It's the Sugar Shack.
Yes. But it's as Mr. Parrish said, it's being part of that experience, those really important experiences within the community. And that is helping to inspire and say, yes, we've got this. So that's how I communicate. Thank you for asking.
Oh, that's great. Does anybody have any follow-ups on those first couple questions?
Do actually. Hi, Erin.
Hi.
I'm Christina. I'm on the Seabrook School Board, and I just have a quick question. When you were talking about taking what you've learned from, last year obviously was different for you than it was for us, and it's different for everybody. But when you talk about moving forward and doing the next step, what do you think that living in, let's say, a post-COVID kind of world, how do you think that factors into what your plans are for next year if this, continues for you?
Thank you. If I may, I'm going to speak directly to Seabrook, and then we'll work back out. So I had the privilege of spending time with Erin, and what I saw her doing really effectively was building a leadership team that had a real strength in a social emotional learning, both adult and child, like student practices. And so I think one aspect of us coming back after COVID is providing students an increased sense of belonging, because even though you've done a great job of having kids in most of the year, it's still been very interrupted and uncomfortable in many ways. And students and families have experienced job loss. There's been more, financial and different insecurities across both of our states. And so I think there's first establishing that sense of well-being. Second is using the assessment data that we have to really work with students and families so that they know where their students are in relation to grade level standards. And even if a student isn't technically on grade level, making sure that every student has access to grade level texts and is being taught towards grade level standards. Those are the sort of the two primary that I would say are most important, Christina. So a sense of belonging and an understanding of where students are in relation to grade level standard, because we can't move forward unless kids feel safe and a sense of belonging. And we can't move forward unless unless really teachers and parents have a clear understanding of where students are and essentially what the road is ahead. So thank you for asking.
Anyone else?
Leslie, it's Greg. I have a few questions.
Sure.
Aaron, may I call you Aaron?
Yes, thanks for asking. May I call you Gregory?
Yeah, Greg, please.
Greg.
Aaron, I'm the chair of the Hampton Falls School Board and I have a few questions for you tonight.
Fantastic.
The first one is, if you're chosen as the superintendent of the SAU 21 school district, you're going to have an opportunity to set the direction of our district for the next decade. Can you help me understand the direction you'd like to go in?
Yes, that's such a good question. Greg, I'll start with what I think is most important, which is that every SAU 21 student who graduates from Winnacunnet High School is college and career ready. And Winnacunnet has had tons of accolades. And yet when you look across the data, it's great for some, but not necessarily for all students. And so what's most important to me over the next decade is that we align K-12 so that regardless of what sending school a child comes from, he or she has every opportunity starting in the 9th grade to begin Algebra 2, and then on the sequence towards Calculus B. Because what happens when some schools offer algebra in the 8th grade and other schools do not, kids already start a leg behind. And that's when the clock starts running when kids get to 9th grade. So it's in my experience, having worked across multiple feeders, so 5th to 6th grade transition from 8th to 9th, is that alignment sometimes can get very disturbed. And especially this year, to Christina's point before, we're going to see even greater variability in students' experiences. So over the decade, I want to see every student graduating from Winnacunnet truly college and career ready, both in mathematics, literacy, science, the arts, and whatever choice they make in terms of career. So that is my vision over a decade. And I believe in my experience over the last 20 years is that is possible when it's done consistently over time. You have only to look at Washington, D.C. public schools, which used to be battling for 48th and 49th in the country, and now is the largest, is the top of the National Assessment for Academic Progress. And they did that over a 10-year period by focusing on teacher quality, content-based professional development, high-quality instructional leaders in every building, and parent and community engagement. And so I think we have models to follow. And given my experience, that is what I would do.
Okay, thank you. My next question, during the interview process, hopefully you've had the opportunity to take a look or review our curriculum. If so, can you share with me what you've liked, what you disliked, where you see the need for some improvement?
That's a good question. That's been less present in the interview process. I've touched on it some, but I wouldn't say I have great clarity. For example, we were just talking about the adoption of Eureka Mathematics at Seabrook on Monday, which I think is a great move because it's really among the best mathematics programs in the country. And it's open education resource, which just means that it continues to get updated and strengthened. So I think I don't think I would be in a position to give you a great answer on curriculum. Thank you, Anne Marie. So I don't think I'd be able to give you a great answer right now, but it's a
That's
strength
fair.
of mine. You know, I was the chief academic officer for both the KIPP Foundation and Denver Public Schools. So I know my way around curriculum.
As a follow-up question, we've got a tremendous competency-based education initiative underway. We've been
Yes.
working on it for a number of years and invested a tremendous amount of money into it. Can you share with us your thoughts on the competency-based education?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Michelle, the principal at Barnard asked me the same question during the first interview process. My experience is as a high school principal, middle school, high school principal. I was part of the first pilot for the Common Core state standards for the city of New York. We were one of 25 and we started in 2010. So starting 11 years ago, I have worked with teams to unpack standards and then use performance-based assessments to evaluate students' progress based on standards rather than based on seat time and based on growth and reaching a standard rather than just a grade. And so I have hands-on experience, 6th through 12th grade, implementing competency-based learning, writing performance tasks, developing rubrics, assembling teams to have inter-rater reliability on grade level tasks so that across disciplines, we better understand what it really means to be a 7th grader, what really means to be a 9th grader, and regardless of what school you're in, that we have the same high level standard across schools. So just to review, I have experience K-12 with hands-on experience, 6-12 with the actual development of competency-based learning.
Thank you. And
Absolutely.
my last question right now, specifically on equality, equity, and race, how do you see these driving curriculum?
Could you say more?
Well, we've got a tremendous amount going on in our nation right now regarding equality, equity, and race. And I'm asking you how you see that or the effects of that driving curriculum.
Okay. No, I first start with we as adults looking at starting with our own privilege and understanding like what it means. I'm a white woman from a middle class background, so I start with one lens when I look at curriculum. And so what I think is most important about the work that we do with diversity, equity, inclusion as it relates to racial equity is that we provide both windows. We give an opportunity for kids to see into different cultures and into different people of different backgrounds, that we have mirrors in our curriculum that allow kids time with self-reflection and critical thinking, both about the world and about themselves, and that we give kids doors such that they have access to further opportunities because we have shown them what else looks, what the world looks like. So in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to curriculum, I think it's incredibly important to every time we look at curriculum to both evaluate the curriculum through the lens of how would this help a student have a window, a mirror, and a door into other environments other than their own. And I did that work did that work in Denver, where we evaluated our middle school mathematics program to say, to what extent does this promote critical thinking for students? And does it allow students to really get to know themselves mathematically? And we convened stakeholder groups from around the city and had teachers come in essentially on Saturdays, and we worked through a curriculum. We developed a rubric, and we made sure that it was both the highest quality and racially equitable. So I think it's an important task, Greg, and it's something that we will need to continue to revisit as our curricula get better and better over time.
Okay. Aaron,
Thank
thank you. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Aaron, I'm going to move on to some management. If you could just explain to us some of your experience with budget preparation and planning, maybe tie it into also negotiating contracts, those kind of things, what that management part of your experience is and what you'd bring to the table for that.
So Leslie, I'm going to take that in essentially like 2.5 parts.
Sure.
So,
No worries.
so budget is sort of a 1.5. So on a global scale, I would say, as we know, our how we spend our dollars reflects our values. And one really important move that we made in Denver Public Schools is we recognize that at a funding of $7,500 per student, that we did not have enough money to do to meet the aggressive targets that we had for student achievement. And so I was part of a small team together with the superintendent that essentially prepared a bond package. And we went to the public asking for specific support for early literacy, college and career, development of the whole child, and teacher leadership and pathways. And we put that together in a package and we gave it to the voters and we said, please, this is what we see. This is what we want to see happen over the next 5 years. It was our Denver 2020 plan. This is what we want to see. We want to make sure that 80% of our third graders are reading on grade level in the next 5 years. This is what it will take. We want to make sure that students graduate from high school, college, and career ready. This is what we need. We want to make sure that kids come into school and feel like they are safe and seen. This is what it will take. And so that's one part of the budget process, is both translating what we want to do academically into a budget package that both the voters and the central team can agree on. So that's one piece of the budget. Second, my individual work, and I love actually doing this, is working with each school leader to set their goals on a yearly, and then on and essentially over the next 3 years, we would set long-term goals and short-term goals as it related to based on student needs, and then we would literally build bottoms-up budgets so that school leaders would see exactly what it took to build a budget. And then we would make decisions based on, after, as you know, majority of a budget is human capital. After human capital, what can you work with? And coming into this coming year, this is where the half is. I've been working on the state level to help guide where ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and our ARPA funding is going, because it's going to 3 buckets. It's going into curriculum and instruction, it's going into social emotional learning, and it's going into infrastructure. And so there's going to be a greater, like, Seabrook will be getting title or getting dollars that, for example, Barnard will not. And so just looking at how does each school leader develop their budget to meet the academic goals, academic and social emotional goals they have for the students in their school. And that's the work I've done in the past. So I've had global experience with it, and then hands-on. And then from a negotiation perspective, I was part of the essentially a 3-member team that negotiated the peer assistance and review process, which was the first time Denver Public Schools had a process by which a teacher, if he or she was had a review that they did not agree with, that they had a way to appeal it rather than litigate. And by doing so, we eliminated several $1 million of attorney's fees on both sides, and also kept sort of allowed the principal to teacher relationship not to fracture, but to really create a fair process around negotiation. And I worked with the attorney, the head of HR, and myself, because I was the director of teacher talent management for Denver. So in addition to that, I've been part of many union conversations over the years, both as a principal and as a regional superintendent.
All right, thanks, Erin.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you. Kelly, I think you had a question. Sorry. Guys, I can't see people's hands, so whoever wants to speak, please just go ahead, okay?
That's okay. So I have two questions. My first question is it may seem like an obvious question, but how important do you think it is to take parents' feelings and opinions under consideration? Like, for example, when we had maybe the going back to school issue, how important do you think it is to take the parents' feelings under consideration?
It's actually, I think, Kelly, you hit on the most important issue and the greatest tension across the country this year. And that, I mean, I would say that what I've seen in Massachusetts this year is the school districts that were the healthiest were those that listened to parents about their own sense of safety, feeling like their student was learning, and balancing the need for both global safety for all kids while also balancing the need for each individual child. One of my mentor principals said to me is a parent's job is to advocate for his or her children, and a school leader's job is to advocate for all of them. And so I see myself as an advocate for your children in addition to you. And so if we're both on the same team advocating for your child, then I think that's sort of the way that we set up that parent to superintendent relationship, so that we're listening and considering needs of every parent and working towards the greater good for all. And so it's a balance, and not every decision, Kelly, will go, one person's way, but I think it's really a balance over time.
Excellent. And then my last question is how important do you feel it is to have open communication between the school and school board members?
Between the school and the school board members?
So if there's situations going on at the school, you know what I mean? Like, not any specific one, just maybe keeping the lines of communication open. Yeah. So that, there's a lot of times, not in one particular school, but even probably in different districts, not even SAU 21, where a lot of things are heard elsewhere and school board members aren't even aware of the situation, maybe things that are important in the school. Not confidential stuff, but.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that last piece. Because in my head, I was thinking about an HR issue as you said that. That's super helpful. Yep. Whenever I coach, I love being a principal manager. I love coaching school leaders. And one thing that I really start with whenever I take over a new relationship is, you always want to make sure that school board members are not surprised by anything happening in your school. And even if it doesn't seem important to you, it may or may not be important to them. So it's really building an awareness, and it's a practice. I don't think every school leader gets it perfect, because there's no such thing as a perfect person or a perfect board member. But I think it's the practice of setting up those like regular communications so that it's more of a habit than anything else. And then I want to speak to your second point, which is in the absence of communication, there are people it's very easy for people to go to other sources. And so that, as you know, is how, conversations happen in different places, not sort of in the light. And so my deep encouragement to my school leaders is always raise the issues, have your ear to the ground, but also make sure you pull your head up and have the conversation so that the boards understand as well as your families understand.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question.
Does anybody else have any other questions that they can think of right now?
Leslie, just to let you know, you're at the 30-minute mark.
Right, that's what I was just going to say. So,
Leslie, I have a quick one, if you
Sure.
can jump in.
Absolutely.
Erin, how do you see yourself as part of the community if you were to become superintendent?
That's a great question. So my family and I came up on Sunday before the walkthrough on Monday to just, take a drive around. We enjoyed going to the Sweaty Nose Brewery, and it was a beautiful day, and just spending some time outside, and then just taking in really the different sort of layers of the overall Hampton community, but sort of the nature of Hampton Beach. We made the mistake of staying along that path on Hampton Beach, and so we got to enjoy all the people who like to juice up their cars and test them, on Sunday night. So we had that experience. Whereas we had just very peaceful.
We won't charge you extra for that. So you're all set.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Yeah. But I had the same sort of bucolic experience of being able to drive around sort of the pastoral, roads of the community. And so just from a community perspective, I see situating myself in and around the community, like physically, as being in, up in the Hampton area. And then from a participatory standpoint, I'll just say I when I'm in, Jim, I'm all in. And so I like to see kids play. I like to see kids run track and then run cross country in the fall and play soccer. And I see the arts performances and be part of just the fabric of activities. And so I see it as something where my best hope is people are like, oh yeah, there's the superintendent again when events happen. Like it's not a thing. It's just, oh yeah, of course she's here. Doesn't she have a life? She should do other things. But that's how I look at it. And that's what I did in Denver. I mean, I loved being a regional superintendent in Denver because when I was in the grocery store, or I went to Mass, or I went for a run, I ran into students and families, and it was just it was just one of my favorite things about the role. I felt like I owned Denver public schools. Like I owned the city of Denver. I represented, and I would take the same sort of approach in SAU 21.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody that we can think? At this point, Erin, do you have questions for us?
I do. All
Awesome.
right. So I'm going to change my screen. But actually, before I begin, there's just some folks I haven't really heard from or gotten to see. Like Tom, I've definitely met you in the previous. Nice to see you again. And I was fortunate to spend time with Caroline and David Hobbs and Matthew this week. But I don't necessarily know how all of you work together. And so it would be really helpful for me to know from, I'm just going to start a values perspective. What would you say are the 2 or 3 core values that represent your community?
Anyone? Okay,
Well,
go ahead.
Are you
Karen.
are you asking about the different districts?
So,
or overall?
yeah. So Sharon, that's a good question. And that's actually, I think, what I'm trying to understand is that when I think about sort of what's tight and what's loose in a school district, for me, what's important and that I hold tight is that we live by the values that we espouse. So if those are students first, equity, excellence, like if those are the core values we're operating by, that doesn't change how we run school or how we how the schools function may change over time, but what we care about and what we believe in does not. And so I'm just trying to understand across this community, what would you say are the, like, among the 2 or 3 core values you have? And you can chat it in if that's easier rather than saying it out loud. I'd love to just understand or see how your values and my values essentially align.
I mean, so I'm a school board member for Barnard School.
Yes.
And as I'm sure you noticed, we are a very small school. So I would have to say one of our core values would be, community. I think that's something that really sets us apart. I mean, not sets us apart because I know community is important for everybody, but just being such a small school, and community, we really support each other. And, I think Jim's question about, how would you kind of see yourself, diving into the SAU, I think that's really important for us, especially at Barnard, because we do value the people, administration being an active, having that active role and being visible in our community.
That's a great answer, Sharon. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And I was curious to see if that, for example, that common value of community exists across schools.
I would say yes. I'll speak for, I think, almost every one of them. As the Winnacunnet School Board, Winnacunnet is, I think community is also one of our top things. So I think community, I think we're working hard on the equity and equality and diversity. We're trying to constantly better where we are. I don't think any of our districts are content to sit where they are. They're all moving forward and adjusting and keeping the students at the forefront.
Last comment. I do have other questions, so thank you, Leslie. That was really helpful. Any other comments?
Aaron, just to piggyback on kind of what Leslie said too, I would say that, and I can only really speak for Seabrook, but I would think that we, in addition to the community piece, we also have a really strong sense of trying to meet all kids where they are, and wherever that is, trying to then grow them towards, obviously there's ultimate goals, like you said, when you hit 9th grade, everybody joins together, and we want everyone to join feeling like they're coming from the same place, even though maybe physically they aren't. But when they get to that point in high school, we want them to feel like they're really prepared properly. And I feel like that's been a big push for Seabrook too, is just to make sure that we are meeting our kids where they are, but also bringing them with us as we, move them towards, growing and getting better and then getting into high school.
Great. Thank you, Christina. That makes a ton of sense. Kelly, did you want to add?
Yeah, so I just want to say that I back Christina up on that 100%. I think because I went to Seabrook School, I went to Winnacunnet, and all my children did as well. And I think what she said is perfect. I think some of the concerns have been that sometimes when Seabrook gets to Winnacunnet, they're not on maybe the same level education-wise as maybe the other, schools. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. We have great teachers. Don't get me wrong. I just think that I think there needs to be some type of evaluation throughout all the schools to make sure everyone's on the same level. And I think Christina was 100% right when she said that.
That's great. I'd like to shift. I have about 5 minutes. Is that right, Leslie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So communication. So, this group of people in front of me right now is clearly cares and wants to make sure that both your schools are represented, but we also have, of course, a unified voice as an SAU. And so when I'm thinking specifically about your board meetings, I'm wondering, what would you say works well with your current board structure, and what might need to change so that you have more fluid communication across each school?
Aaron, this is Greg Parrish. I'll speak for Hampton Falls, or I'll give my opinion of Hampton Falls.
Yes.
I think the structure of our board meetings is fine. I think that the way we do our business, but across the district and not just in Hampton Falls, is done quite well. I think where each district struggles, and this ties back to the communication piece, is community involvement. Getting people to attend our meetings. There is so much information that is shared at these meetings, as you know, and the more people we can get from our communities engaged into our meetings, I think is beneficial to us as a district and individual districts as a whole. So the question becomes to you as the leader of the district, what do you do to propose getting that involvement from the communities? It seems that the only time the community shows up if there is a problem or an issue that needs to be addressed. And aside from that, I think the structure itself, from how we conduct meetings and do business, is very well executed, in my opinion.
Thank you. Do others have anything to add? Okay, so I'll move on from there. I had the privilege of spending time with Dr. Hobbs, Dr. Rakelian, soon to be Dr. Ferreira. And what I saw was a very talented group of district leaders, as talented as I have worked with in both New York City and Denver. So a real credit to you that you've recruited such a strong team. I'm wondering, in what ways would you like to see the SAU 21 team developed so that they can continue to build strength, so that we as a team continue to build strength across the districts? So what would you like to see? How might the rules stay the same, and how, if at all, would they change?
I will comment on this, Aaron. I think this board would generally agree with you. This is a very strong superintendent team at the SAU office. The work they do is amazing. They really are the glue that keeps us going and keeps us together. And so I would agree with you on that. How do we enhance that? I think we do what we can to provide them challenges, how we can provide them opportunities. The more cohesive they are, the better they are for our district and us as board members. Like I said, the work they do is invaluable to board members in the district. And it's an honor to work with them.
Thank you. Leslie, if I may, in this last minute, I'd just like to share a little bit of praise for the school leaders and then provide a closing statement. Is that okay for you?
Sure. Yep, that's fine.
Great. So I wanted to share two pictures that I saw in my school visits, and this is from the science teacher in Southampton. This is, for all you playing at home, this is a puffer fish, and this is the work that she did on a cart at Barnard. And so regardless, people talk about sort of learning loss during COVID, but what I saw in my walkthrough on Monday was an incredibly focused group of teachers who care about every child. And so what that tells me is that you are ready for a leader who has a track record of uniting constituencies, improving student achievement, supporting and bolstering social emotional learning, and really bringing together in a coherent way what every Winnicott graduate looks like. So to Kelly's point, let us make sure that all of our K-8 development results in every child having an opportunity based on their college and career hopes to graduate Winnicott College and career ready. And that's the strength that I would bring to your community. And I just want to say thank you for the time you've invested in me. Thank you to your team and for all the work that you've done. And it was really a pleasure to be part of this process. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Erin. We really appreciate your time through all of this. It's never an easy process, I know. So does anybody have any last minute comments, questions before we let Erin go? I don't see any hands because I don't see any faces. So
I just like, hi, Erin, this is Jill
There we
Swayze
go.
from Hampton Falls. I know that this is a awful forum to be having an interview, and there are so many of us, and everybody's cameras and lights and everything are different. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed hearing from you, and appreciate your time and everything you put into this so far.
Thank you, Jill.
And we will be in touch, Erin. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring Meredith in now.
All righty. See if I can get her on camera.
She should be appearing any minute now.
Hello there.
There she is. Hey, Meredith, how are you?
Well, thank you, Leslie. Nice to see
Thanks. So we have there's 26 of us here, and I apologize for not going through, and I should have apologized to Erin in the beginning too, of not just going through and introducing everybody, but I figure at this point, let's just dive in if that's okay with you.
That is just fine.
Okay.
I'm not as much fun as in person, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
Well, exactly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a couple of questions, then people are going to jump in and have follow-up questions. Because I'm an idiot on Zoom and I can't see people raising hands and things, people are just going to jump in and ask if they want, okay?
Sounds just fine.
All right. So I'm going to start with your with leadership, basically. Can you give us what your experience working with multiple boards has been?
So I am living that right now in my current districts. I have 3 individual boards representing 3 separate two K6 and 1 K8 district, as well as a joint board. And we also meet periodically with the joint board of the receiving high school. So we have 3 policy manuals, 4 collective bargaining agreements. Each board generally meets once a month. And the work obviously occurs in between. It's about communicating with board members, keeping people apprised of important things that are happening or incidents in this year in particular, when COVID cases are identified, but it's a kind of ongoing work. Multiple budgets, obviously, it's, that is in many cases the New Hampshire way in my experience. But I think it's about just being able to prioritize, understand the needs of your different constituencies and communities, and having good communication.
Leslie, I think you're muted.
At least you didn't hear me swear. Okay, so thank you. Can you let me know what your entry plan or your first 100 days might look like?
Oh, sure. So for me, the most important piece is getting to know stakeholders and creating opportunities to hear from them. So I would start obviously with board members, staff members, students, I would hope, in some cases, parents, community members, and be asking folks to nominate other people that I might speak with. I would see some of that occurring individually, some of that occurring in small groups, but really taking the opportunity to hear from people directly, face to face, if possible. As we know, this circumstances are in flux, but obviously making other opportunities available as well. To really just hear what are some of the strengths of your district, what are some of the challenges that people see, what are people's kind of hopes and dreams as you move forward, what are areas we could improve upon, but really structuring the work so that you get to hear information across all stakeholder groups, and then can sort of synthesize that information as you work back with the boards through goal setting. And my understanding is you'd like to do some work forward with strategic planning, and it would very much inform that work as well.
Great. And so, and to follow up on that, then how do you communicate all of that? You know, like how do you get, and how do you communicate with all the shareholders and the stakeholders in the communities in the different districts?
I wish it was simple. The reality is people absorb information in lots of different ways. And so I think you have to be able to hit on multiple levels somewhat simultaneously. So, you know, newsletters and email communication, but also you need to be able to hold those face-to-face opportunities for conversation. You might be doing press releases on a particular topic, but it's also about seeking feedback. So if you, for example, if I go through a listening and learning process and talking with the stakeholders in your community, it's important when I synthesize that information, kind of along the way, to check back with those folks. Hey, is this what I really heard? Because I think, you know, it's often the case that we don't listen deeply to information that is conveyed to us, and we sometimes miss pieces. So I think part of good communication, part of checking in with your stakeholders is going back to revisit those conversations and make sure that you are receiving accurate information and interpreting things accurately. And then it's saying, geez, okay, here are the goals, here are the themes that I heard across the board. Does this resonate with people? And you know, it doesn't stop. Communication is an ongoing process, and it also requires that you, the listener, are open to feedback. And that, I think, is one of the most critical pieces, is sort of being ready to receive that and make changes if you're being told that's not what we said at all. You got this all wrong.
All wrong. Okay, that sounds smart. And so then, because of the way you've discussed, you know, the communication and the listening skills and the whatnot, so then how do you get that all together, and then how do you share that vision of where you see our districts going, and how do you get that out? How do you propose to do that?
Again, I think it requires more than one way. Part of that happens through board meetings. Part of that happens through in-person forums with folks, say, at each individual school or across communities. I think it also is about, once you sort of have that strategic plan, that vision, those goals that you've established, it's also about checking in to see if you're meeting the targets that you've established and providing that feedback to the boards and to the communities along the way. Again, it's a dynamic and evolving process. Sometimes we establish goals and things like pandemics occur, which cause us to shift and change our focus, but it's important to articulate that, right? That's not that we've necessarily, in this case, changed our focus areas, but we've needed to press pause on some things because the well-being of students and focus on instruction and the adaptations we've needed to make this year have taken priority. But your community needs to understand that, because usually you're asking your community to support your values, your goals, when you ask them to vote on your budget. And if you're not communicating, here are the things that we're doing, here's how we're utilizing these resources, here's where we are enacting the vision that we've heard from the folks in this community, they're not going to support your budget.
Right. Well, and you've just done the perfect segue to you're explaining your budget experience with preparing budgets and planning budgets and whatnot. And if you could share with us some of your experience doing that.
Okay. So I had the opportunity, I would say, before I became a superintendent, to step into a temporarily vacant finance director role, business administrator role, and walk through a budget process Obviously knowing from having been a principal how to go through those steps, but then sitting in a very different seat and feeling the pressure of making sure you were responsible for every single number, making sure that you had the right calculations for every person on your payroll. And from there, again, stepping into a superintendency where the role is, I think, more about making sure that your budget is aligned to your values and priorities. Most of your budget is personnel. So you are, hopefully you are strategically placing personnel in positions. If you are adding programs or positions, you've articulated that plan for over a series of years. You're not trying to do that all at once. It's about being thoughtful and strategic, but also, again, that underlying communication and alignment to your goals. For me, I've often, in Cape Elizabeth, the business administrator was shared with the town and the school. And so when it came time to do budget presentations, I typically did those rather than the business administrator, just because of the nature of the work. The town manager did the same. So I'm pretty intimately familiar with the various categories of budgets and very comfortable with numbers and the big picture, but also in helping people see the significant changes, but also the rationale behind those changes when you're presenting a budget. I've had the opportunity also to work on a school bond in Newmarket, and that's another, obviously, aspect of budgeting. Grants management, and I'm doing that again right now for our special education grant funds, as well as some of the ESSER funds that we've received in my districts. Negotiations are a piece of that as well. Knowing, okay, we've got a contract negotiation coming up in 2 years. What do we want to be able to accomplish before and after that, so that we're not, maybe hitting taxpayers with multiple things at one time. Long-term capital planning, again, both in Cape Elizabeth and in my current role, been able to coordinate that work with the towns. So that the school's capital requests and the town's capital requests are somewhat balanced over time. In Cape Elizabeth, we did a 10-year capital improvements plan to really look long-term at how we could best utilize resources within the community, because taxpayers have only one pocket for those funds to come from.
Great. I'm going to pause here. Does anybody want to jump in? Does anybody have any follow-ups or anything that they want explained more in depth?
Leslie, it's Greg. I have 3 questions.
Of course you do. I love that. Thanks, Greg.
Good evening, Meredith. Thanks for being here. My name is Greg Parrish. I'm Hampton Falls School Board. May I call you Meredith?
Absolutely.
Thank you. My first question to you, if chosen to be the next superintendent of the SAU 21 school district, you're going to have the opportunity to set the direction for our district for about 10 years or a decade or so. Can you help me understand the direction you'd like to go in?
I like to think that it's not the superintendent's direction, that it's really the community's direction. And I think, again, that's the work of strategic planning, is really listening to your community and your stakeholders. From my time in the schools yesterday, I would say there were, I'll say 3 themes that really emerged very strongly. One, obviously, a focus on social emotional learning, which for obvious reasons this year is on the front burner, but I think is important work that always underlies the academic work, because if students aren't feeling safe and secure and physically and emotionally well, they are not ready for learning. So I, again, clearly heard that theme, and I think that has to underlie the work that we do in schools. I also heard a focus really on the whole student, and really an emphasis that I think we will see an increasing focus on in schools as we return, more fully from this pandemic, but a real focus on personalizing the learning experience for each child, really meeting them where they are. And I think that's something that's very achievable in a competency-based system, which was another theme that I heard reiterated through my work or visits, not my work. It wasn't a work day for me. It was a nice opportunity to see schools in action. But I heard that articulated across the schools yesterday. And the third area that I really heard was was again, giving students opportunities that equity focus. So the personalization, yes, but also the equity, recognizing that not everyone comes to school with the same tools or skills or level of readiness, but being able to provide the supports where necessary, as well as the extensions for students who are already achieving above and beyond where we want them to be. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, we want students to go out into the world ready for whatever opportunities are presented to them, enthusiastic about that, knowing what their strengths are. And I think, again, in the competency-based world, you've created ownership and opportunity for students to really know who they are as learners, and I think as human beings, which is a strong foundation for success. So I've heard what you're already doing, but it would be a process of sort of checking that and working collaboratively with the community to articulate that vision.
And you kind of segue into my next question.
Okay.
During the interview process, hopefully you've had a chance to look at our curriculum. If you have had this chance, can you share with me what you liked, disliked, or where you see needs of improvement?
So I would say I had less direct focus on the curriculum itself, but I did have conversation in some of the schools and during the interview process with some of the focus areas. And I heard a very strong focus on mathematics instruction. Got a couple of schools. Seabrook has recently implemented a newer math program. Southampton is in the process of that. I heard a focus on some STEM work as well, really integrating those pieces. But again, the competency pieces itself. So that alignment of your curriculum K-12, I heard very clearly. I would say generally, my impression is that you're fairly closely aligned to the New Hampshire state standards, but your educators have done the work of really narrowing the focus to what are the most important things, what are the most important standards, what are those competencies that kind of cut across your curricular areas to focus on as you move forward. And I think, again, you've done a nice job, and I know that work is not done and it's ongoing work, but I think the team has done a nice job of really looking at that particularly 8th to 9th grade transition and making sure that the alignment is in place. So less about the specific content, but much more about the alignment.
You mentioned competency-based education a minute ago. Can you share with me your thoughts on competency? We've got a considerable investment into it at this point after 3 or 4 years. And so I would like to kind of know what your thoughts on competency and your ideas there may be.
So as someone who was a classroom teacher, I was able to teach English language arts at the middle school level for several years. And then I transitioned into work as a special education teacher. And having taught students in the same classroom who were reading at a first, second, third grade level, as well as students who are reading at a post-high school level, competency-based education makes a lot of sense to me because it's about evaluating students on what they know already, what they're able to do, and helping them progress along that curricular continuum. I, like many people, as we sort of embarked on this work, wasn't sure at first what that might mean at the collegiate level and how we're, you know, the concern you hear frequently from parents is how are colleges going to deal with this? What is this going to look like? Is this going to hinder our children as they apply to colleges and universities? And I will tell you from my work with the College Board over the last 7 or 8 years, where I've had an opportunity to sit with admissions directors and lots of higher ed folks, as well as K-12 folks from across the country. The reality is colleges are very used to dealing with lots of different information about students who come to them. And Stu Schmiel, who's the admissions director at MIT, when we had conversations about this work, one of the things they look for is students who have a real passion for a particular area and who work deeply in that area. And I think competency-based education can help shine a spotlight on that. I think it helps students to showcase their strengths rather than their deficits, but it also helps them identify what those weaker areas are and really take ownership of their learning.
Okay, thank you. And my last question for you, Meredith. specifically relating to equality, equity, and race. How do you see those three issues driving curriculum?
So I think when we look at anything in a district, if equity is a driving focus, and again, that was a theme I heard yesterday as well, but if that's a driving focus, then whenever you're adopting curricula, you have to be able to look at it through an equity lens. You know, are we providing multiple perspectives? Are we giving students the opportunity to examine issues from different viewpoints? Are we choosing materials that represent diverse perspectives, show images of diverse peoples? Are we using firsthand sources in history, and are we inclusive in our approach? And so that should be, you know, when you're looking at how does this meet, does this program meet our standards? Are we covering, you know, all of the issues that are going to be perhaps visited on the state assessment? Are we being true to ourselves and honoring the policies and goals that we've established related to equity and inclusion? So I think it, not just for curriculum, but I think it underpins the work that you do across the board and decisions that you make as boards, you know, on just about every issue.
Okay. Meredith, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Hi, Meredith. I'm Christina Kaiser. I'm on the Seabrook School Board, and I want to kind of reference back to what you were talking about when Leslie had asked about your first 100 days and kind of what things you want to kind of put in place. And I kind of want to hear what your thoughts are on what we might consider a post-COVID world and what that looks like leading into your first 100 days, and what you think the most important things would be to focus on as we enter, you know, the new school year.
So I actually had a lot of conversation with folks about that very question yesterday, because I know, and I heard it reflected in conversations with people yesterday, there's a lot of exhaustion, you know, in our staff, in our parents, and frankly, in our students. You know, so giving people time to regroup this summer, re-energize, spend some time at the beach, outdoors with their families, doing those things that make them smile and fill them up is really critical. And that's a balancing act. We've got all of these ESSER dollars, you know, coming in some cases. Seabrook obviously will be receiving some of those funds. And it, you know, at my educator core, I'm like, oh, professional development, wouldn't it be great? But I also know this is not the moment for that, right? We still have time to do that, but we really need to make sure people are well and healthy and recovered from the drain of the last, 14 months, longer by the time we return, before we do that. I also, in talking with folks at Winnacunnet, that was one of the questions that I had for Bill and his team. How are you planning to bring students back next year? And wisely, they said, that they think the students who are arriving in 9th grade will be able to have a lot of the normal activities that entering 9th graders do. But the students who came in as 9th graders this year missed out on a lot of that. So they want to pay special attention to those sophomores who didn't have some of those normalizing experiences that students have. And obviously, again, sort of focusing on those social emotional pieces is pivotal for students and staff. But I also think it's an opportunity to really rethink, not necessarily rethink, but to continue to grow, I think, that competency-based work and focus on that personalized learning experience for individual students. We'll have assessment data and information. Obviously, we're collecting that now as we go through the spring assessment cycle, but utilizing that in thoughtful ways and really giving individual students the supports that they need to be successful.
Great, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the question.
Anybody else questions? Anyone? Okay.
Sorry, Leslie, I have a quick one, maybe quick.
Absolutely.
Hi, Meredith, this is Jill Swayze. I'm with the Hampton Falls School Board. Thank you for your time tonight. One area that we have often struggled with, I think, certainly on, well, I can't speak for every board, I can speak for my board, but also in administrative level, a little bit of accountability. You know, when having those feedback loops and checking back that we're being accountable to the things we say we're going to do. Maybe you could speak a little bit about how you've handled that in the past, or what are the challenges associated with being accountable and how we can think about overcoming some of that.
I think well, it's always scary, right? Because with, in work with students, we don't always know what the outcomes are going to be with 100% certainty, right? We know what the input is, we don't always know what the output will be. And so I think sometimes educators are a little bit more leery of that than others, but I also think educators hold themselves to incredibly high standards, perhaps higher than maybe the general public might hold them. And so it's finding that just right balance. But I think involving faculty in setting the goals and establishing those benchmarks that you're going to measure and check in on is really important. Giving them ownership of those pieces allows them to help tell the story. It's not about catching people, it's about continuous improvement. And the reality is we're not going to meet all of our goals in the timelines that we establish. Right? That's just not realistic. We may meet some of them. We may meet some of them really early. Some of them, we may be struggling to meet over time. It's about how we adapt and overcome and examine those goals and the barriers to meeting those goals that really is the work. It's easy to say 99%, 95% of our students are going to be reading on grade level by March, right, of next year. But the reality is, things happen and we need to be prepared to sort of shift and be nimble and address the issues that arise and tell the story of the work, because we can still be proud of the work, even if it isn't 100% meeting the benchmark. And it really is about carving out time to come back and tell those stories and report on the ongoing work.
Great, thank you. And I didn't mean to imply that accountability meant achieving marks in a, designated outcomes.
But I think, but I think there is a sense, right, for folks who've worked in education with, some of the testing or what has felt like, I think in some years, high stakes testing, that accountability is about if you're not meeting the target, then you're in trouble and you've done something wrong. And that is not my view. Accountability is about holding ourselves to high standards and expectations and being willing to examine the work that we're doing and make changes to it to achieve the best results that we can.
Great, thank you so much.
Anybody else?
Hey, I see Kelly's hand, Leslie.
Thank you. Kelly, jump in.
Hi, my name is Kelly Huber. I'm the Seabrook School Board. And my question is how important do you think it is for communication or taking under consideration the parents' feelings and opinions about things and decisions being made within the school?
So I think making time to hear from parents is very important. And I think we sometimes forget to do that until after we've made a decision and then we get the feedback, right? And so it's a tricky balance sometimes because the world in schools moves very quickly. And as administrators, we're making lots of decisions simultaneously. But I think as you practice in this work over time, you learn to sort of stop and take the pulse, check the thoughts along the way with, parents that maybe you're having a conversation with your parent-teacher organizations, and also open up for dialogue. If you make a decision that is not well received or something goes wrong, that's a great time to pull people together. The interview committee heard part of a story about a lockdown incident at school I was working in, where a former student had been able to enter a building through a locked door. It was a very difficult day, and it was followed up a couple of weeks later with a bomb threat. that occurred at our schools. And, we handled the incident, parents, picked up children, we did the evacuations, all of those pieces went very smoothly and things were fine. But what we recognized and what the follow-up to that was that I didn't talk to the interview committee about was the meetings that we had with parents. And the police chief and I recognized that, this was really stressful. There was a lot of emotion. There was a lot of misunderstanding or lack of knowledge in some cases on the part of parents about what our procedures were and how those things worked. And we recognized immediately we needed to bring people in. So we opened up our, middle school cafeteria and had, the very next evening, parents were able to come and speak with us. And we had to, listen for a while and just hear those concerns and that frustration. But it opened a dialogue to let us really resolve the issue. And I think parents left feeling more secure that we had a handle on the issues and were approaching the issues with their children's best interests at heart. But that information hadn't been communicated to them beforehand well enough. So, those things are going to happen. We're going to make those mistakes. We do our best to kind of anticipate, where the pushback might be as we're making decisions. And, there are hard decisions, of course, in this work because it involves people. But being willing to kind of check ourselves and go back and revisit the issues and be available for that conversation and be willing to take that feedback, which can, feel pretty hot and heavy sometimes, is also part of our work, and I think strengthens the relationships over time.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Leslie?
Yes.
Hi. I don't see her on the screen, but
I can see you, Mr. Marsh.
okay. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
I want to thank you for applying, especially being from New Hampshire. Welcome, welcome back.
Thank you.
Just a couple things. One, I don't know if during the interview process, our joint board is a very respectful board of all of the constituents on that board. And also at Winnacunnet as well, with all the boards, I believe that all the boards are very respectful of each other, and each board respects each other's board. And as you may know, that all of the sending schools to Winnacunnet have been blue ribbon schools in New Hampshire, as well. Winnacunnet being one of the top 100 schools in the country, and usually in the top 10 in New England. And we thank all of the other board members for that, for the sending schools, because if you don't have anything to work with, again, I want to thank you again for applying, and we'll see how it goes. But my question is, because this occurred at Winnacunnet, two of our key people were sort of solicited out of our, in one being the interim superintendent and the other being the assistant superintendent. And great people. And in our schools, as you probably noticed, we have great teachers, great administrators, and everyone is working for the students. And to say that the teacher contract is good for what, another couple of years? I believe so, so that you wouldn't be involved in that. And again, thank you for applying.
Thank you. I had a great day yesterday visiting your schools, and I would certainly agree that you have a lot to be proud of, and I could see and feel the pride walking around, from the artwork on display to the students who gave me a tour. to the administrators being able to share things that they were proud of, as well as the teachers and the instruction that was occurring in classrooms. So, I commend you. It is not easy to bring multiple communities together into a high school. I attended a regional high school in New Hampshire, so I know that it's a challenge to bring those different communities together. But I commend you and your teams for the work that you have done to accomplish that.
Thanks, Meredith. Does anybody have any follow-up questions for Meredith before we ask her if she's got questions for us?
Yeah,
No,
Leslie,
you don't have anything, right? Yeah.
we are at the 30-minute mark, though.
Post it.
Just letting you know.
Okay, you got. All right. Go ahead, Meredith. Tell us if you've got questions for us, and then
Sure.
anything that you want us to know that we don't know. How's that?
Well, some of you have spent 6-ish hours with me, so you probably know more than you want to about me at this point. One of the questions that I asked of folks during the interview process, and Leslie and Jim, you were able to answer this question, so you get a moment off right now. But one of the things that helped me, I think, understand who you are as board members and how you approach your work is asking you to tell me about a experience that you had in your K-12 years that has really stood out to you, positive or negative, and impacted the way you think about the educational system.
That's a loaded question.
I know.
K through 12 as personally?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm out of this one.
I actually can
I had a
reference
lot.
something.
My educational background and personal background, it's a little different from probably anybody else's here, coming from foreign lands and missing school years. So yeah, it's a little different.
So I'll share.
Jim, were you going to speak?
I'll step out of the skinny branches. I'll give two teachers. First was Mrs. Johnston, who was a third grade teacher who gave me a love of reading. She gave me a love of reading not only by teaching language arts, but by sharing books with the classroom, about 15, 20 minutes a day, and then having us talk about what we learned. The second is Mr. Zwicker, who was a sixth grade teacher of mine, who realized that I, going into sixth grade, actually did not memorize my multiplication tables, and he was tough on me. And every morning, I had to, for 9 days, I had to come in and recite my my multiplication tables, first number 2s, 3s, 4s, all the way through until I could prove that I did it. And it was love. It was tough love. It was hard, but I can do my math now.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Christina, you looked like you were going to speak a minute ago.
I was just going to actually reference a fourth grade teacher of mine who I'm still friends with to this day. And she brought in more of a creativity into the classroom, which I really loved. And so when we had units on, marine biology and things like that, she really made it feel like the classroom was like we were in an aquarium and we were learning all the things and we were underwater. And so that really gave me a love of creativity, really, and just incorporating those things into my daily life. But also, if I do re-enter the school and teach, then I would want to bring that the same kind of creativity and spunk and fire and things that, in the years following, that kids would remember 20, 30 years later, that they would remember those things and they would reference back to that to say that that was a really wonderful time in their lives.
Not trying to call on you, but I don't know who can see what, but I could see her hand. Sorry.
Oh, no, please. You know what? Like anybody, like I said, I see 4 in front of me. So yeah, please jump in, anyone.
Okay, so it's Kelly from the Seabrook School Board. So is this pretty much is this question what our experiences were that stood out to us in school?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that in Seabrook Middle School, I had 2 teachers that back then I was not fond of. They were probably the hardest teachers. They did not let us, one of my English teacher, are we allowed to say names?
Are they
Maybe
still
not.
here? Probably
Probably
not.
not, Leslie, no, maybe not. So no, I don't, no, he's not, because, no.
You can use an initial.
He was an old school teacher. His name was Mr. Devlin, Arthur Devlin. And we had to know every noun, pronoun, verb, I mean, right down the line. And he was brutal. He was tough. And then I had Mr. Smith, and he was a math teacher, and he would hit us with a ruler. And most people would frown down upon that. But I wish, and I shouldn't say this as a school board member, but I wish we had more teachers like that now. Because I think not necessarily, I know, Dave, I can see Dave going, oh, no, I don't mean that.
I'm assuming you don't mean hitting them with rulers,
No,
but you mean like holding those
just
high
mean that
expectations.
They
Yes.
cared enough. They cared enough to make you learn. And I wouldn't say it was in a negative way. It was, I look back now and I respect them. They made you respect them. You didn't dare, I know from with my mother and my father, and I'm the same way with my kids, I better not get a call home about being disrespectful. And these two teachers, they didn't tolerate it. And their superiors never made them tolerate it. So I guess my point is that I look back now, and the teachers that I had that were more strict and required more from me, and made me respect them, they're the teachers that I look back now, and I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I do now without them. So I just think that the kids who say, oh, I don't want that person as a teacher, they're mean, I would say, take that teacher.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Teachers who challenged you, supported you, and inspired you, it sounds like.
I wish they were still there. Things would, yeah. Yeah, thank
And
you.
what every child deserves, I think, in their education, right? That challenge, that support, and that inspiration.
Right, because I don't always get that at home either,
Leslie, I know you are all on a time schedule, so I can stop if you, you all want to move on. Either way.
Tell us why you want this job. Tell us why you're the best. Never mind.
Yeah.
Not why you want the job. Why are you the best person for this job?
Okay. As Mr. Marsh just pointed out, I was born in New Hampshire. I've lived here most of my life. That doesn't necessarily, in and of itself, make someone a strong candidate, but I think I do have a strong appreciation for small communities in New Hampshire. The town I grew up in had 2,000 people. Our school district was not highly successful, and yet I also had teachers who challenged, inspired, and supported me to really reach my fullest potential. And I've had great opportunities in my life to advance professionally and personally. And I credit that to the educational system and to my, I've been fortunate to have strong family support, but I really credit that to my teachers and educators who are part of my life and the systems that I was able to be a part of. And I believe that is the work, and feel very passionately that is why we're all in this field of education. I have been fortunate to lead school systems that are very high achieving, as well as those who have been more resource challenged with a more transient population. And in all cases, I think able to maintain the focus on high expectations, as well as meeting the individual needs of learners and really growing those community values. And for me, your communities feel like a great place to continue that work. I having been a K-6 principal, really love small schools. And again, as a person who attended a regional high school and who is working with some feeder districts into one now, I've also been able to experience that end of things. And I think I could contribute to your mission and goals. My personal values, strong personal values, are equity, integrity, and compassion. And I feel and felt certainly yesterday, as well as through the interview process, that those values align really well with the values that you have for your school communities.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Meredith. Thank
Thank
you. Thank you for enduring this process for sure. it's so much fun. And
It has been fun.
It has been fun. We will be in touch shortly. All
I
righty.
appreciate it. I wish you all the best in your decision making, and I appreciate everyone's time tonight. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person, and best wishes.
Thank you so much, Meredith. Take care.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're gonna go to do we need a motion to go to non-public, or are we just gonna go?
I'll make a motion to go to non-public.
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
Oh, anybody can second before it.
Excellent. I'll second.
Okay, just let me catch up to you guys. That was Greg Parrish, or no, Jim Kime.
Jim and Jill.
And Jill. Okay, and for the vote, Anthony Lang,
Yes.
Barbara Goodman,
Yes.
Greg Parrish,
Yes.
Jason Farias,
Yes.
Jill Swayze,
Yes.
Brian Belanger. Brian Belanger? Is Brian still with us?
I saw him
He
give the
gave-
thumbs
I
up.
see him.
He
He's
gave a
muted.
thumbs up. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
my mute button's hidden here.
Okay, yeah. And Danielle Strader,
Yes.
Martin Tavishian. I think
Martin-
Martin had
You had
to leave at 7 is what,
Right.
is he still there?
No, you have to drop.
Okay. Nermina Peterson? Nermina Peterson? Is Nermina still with us?
Can she not hear me?
Oh, I can hear you
Oh,
now.
there you go.
Okay.
Tom Von Jess?
Yes.
Christina Kaiser?
Yes.
Jennifer Hubbard?
Yes.
Kelly Huber?
Yes.
Jim Kime?
Yes.
Rebecca Burdick?
Yes.
Sharon Gordon?
Yes.
Henry Marsh?
Yes.
Leslie LaFond?
Yes.
Nicole Seco?
Yeah.
Tony Delano?
Yes.
And Tricia O'Keefe.
Yes.
Okay, you guys will now go into non-public at 7:47 PM. Dave sent you an email that we have several attendees on this meeting, so it's going to be easier for you to jump on a different Zoom. For the non-public, I will keep this meeting open for the attendees to still sit here and wait for you guys to return.
All right. Thanks, Rhonda.
Perfect.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Rhonda.
And then do you want me to just somebody want to do that motion?
I'll make a motion to come out of non-public.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, so we have Greg Parrish and Nermina Peterson,
Yes.
and I will go ahead and start taking the vote. And if he's not there, I'll just put not present when we get there.
Yeah. If I can get him on the phone, would that work?
He can always call in. Yeah, absolutely. So
He said
Barbara,
he's trying.
Anthony Lang,
Yes.
Barbara Goodman,
Yes.
Greg Parrish,
Yes.
Jason Farias,
Yes.
Jill Swayze,
Yes.
Brian Belanger,
Yes.
Danielle Strader,
Yes.
Nermina Peterson,
Yes.
Tom Von Jess,
Yes.
Christina Kaiser,
Yes.
Jennifer Hubbard,
Yes.
Kelly Huber,
Yes.
Jim Kime,
Yes.
Rebecca
Oh.
Burdick,
Yes.
Sharon
Yeah.
Gordon,
Yes.
Henry Marsh. We will come back. Leslie LaFond,
Yes.
Nicole Seco,
Yes.
Tony Delano,
Yes.
and Tricia O'Keefe.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to come back. Did Henry make it in?
He didn't. Do you want me to put him on my speakerphone? Would that work or no?
If you can, I will put for this piece that he was not present at vote.
Okay.
Um,
Let me see if I. That way, if I can put him on, and then you guys can hear him, right?
Okay, so I have the motion to close non-public session, resume the public meeting. You guys are now back in the public meeting at 8:47.
Henry, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, I've got you on my speakerphone so everybody can hear. How's that?
That's fine.
There we go. Can you guys hear him?
Yes.
Yay!
Yay,
Okay.
technology. Well
Oh,
done.
God, I love it. All right, Jill, you wanted to make a motion?
I do, yes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the search committee and all of the candidates. We would like to make a motion to nominate Meredith Nadeau as superintendent of SAU 21 effective July 1st, 2021, contingent upon contract negotiations and a successful criminal background check.
I'll second that. Or whoever wants to. Go ahead.
Second.
There you go.
Did Leslie or Jason do that?
Jason can do it.
Okay.
That was me, but whatever.
Oh, who was where? Who's Jennifer? It was Jennifer.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry.
That's okay. All right. Anthony Lang,
Yes.
Barbara Goodman,
Yes.
Greg Parrish,
Yes.
Jason Farias,
Yes.
Jill Swayze,
Yes.
Brian Belanger,
Yes.
Danielle Strader,
Yes.
Nermina Peterson,
Yes.
Tom Von Jess,
Yes.
Christina Kaiser,
Yes.
Jennifer Hubbard,
Yes.
Kelly Huber,
Yes.
Jim Keim,
Yes.
Rebecca Burdick,
Yes.
Sharon Gordon,
Yes.
Henry Marsh,
Yes.
Leslie LaFond,
Yes.
Nicole Seco,
Yes.
Tony Delano,
Yes.
and Tricia O'Keefe.
Yes.
I have that vote recorded. It was unanimous.
Thank you, everyone. I truly appreciate the committee's work on this. Jim, thank you for heading it up. You did an amazing job, and my hat's off to you. At this point,
Leslie, can I make a motion?
yes, please.
I'd also like to concur. Thank you to the committee. Jim, Dave, Tom, the rest of the board members, Jason. I've been down this path. It's an arduous task, and congratulations to you. That being said, Leslie, I'd like to make a motion to give Leslie LaFond permission to represent the joint board in contract negotiations with the pending superintendent Meredith Nadeau.
A second.
Is that good enough, Matt?
Yes, thank you.
Somebody have that written down, or I'll just replay the recording to get those exact verbiage.
Okay.
Sorry, Rhonda, it wasn't written down.
I'll get that to you, Rhonda.
Okay, thank you.
But I want the balloons and the lollipop added.
You're doing the negotiation, Leslie.
That's right. I get to do that. I wonder what color she'll like.
Oh, I have
No.
Okay, you need to have the upper hand, Leslie.
I will. I promise.
So I'm going to take a vote, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Anthony Lang,
Yes.
Barbara Goodman,
Yes.
Greg Parrish,
Yes.
Jason Farias,
Yes.
Jill Swayze,
Yes.
Brian Belanger,
Yes.
Danielle Strader,
Yes.
Nermina Peterson,
Yes.
Tom Von Jess,
Yes.
Christina Kaiser,
Yes.
Jennifer Hubbard,
Yes.
Kelly Huber,
Yes.
Jim Keim,
Yes.
Rebecca Burdick,
Yes.
Sharon Gordon,
Yes.
Henry Marsh,
Yes.
Leslie LaFond,
Yes.
Nicole Seco,
Yeah.
Tony Delano,
Yes.
and Tricia O'Keefe.
Yes.
Okay, I have that vote recorded, and that as well was unanimous.
And I promise I will do well, guys. I promise. I'll be serious during it. I promise.
We know you will. You'll
Excellent.
do awesome.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I will second.
All right,
Everybody wave.
I'm okay with the wave on that one.
All right.
That was,
Thank you.
Guys, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Oh,
Dave, I'm going to call you in a minute.
thanks.